So pause if you need to, and let's jump right into these notes because it's exciting. I think it's exciting. And if you don't, you're lame. Pause if you need to. All right, restructuring France. So far you've got the National Assembly, and the National Assembly has written the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, and they have proclaimed a lot of things like equality, we're all paying taxes, there's not going to be any more estates, yada, yada, yada. Well, now today they're actually really going to do some physical changes to France. So let's kind of talk about how this all kind of gets going. Well, so far, after the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, Louis XVI and his family are chilling in Versailles. And Louis XVI, even though they wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Man and they created a constitutional monarchy, basically Louis XVI kind of has to sign off that he agrees with it. Well, you can imagine that he doesn't. He basically is just chilling in Versailles in his big palace and ignoring everything, kind of hoping that he can kind of stall for whatever reason until somebody comes and bails him out. I don't know, but he's not signing it. And think about it. If he actually signs that they're going to be a constitutional monarchy and that, the Declaration of the Rights of Man, then that's pretty much admitting defeat. So Louis XVI doesn't do anything. Meanwhile, bread prices continue to skyrocket. People are starving throughout France, which leads to basically what's called the Women's March on Versailles. So like I said, Louis is refusing to ratify, what ratify, guys, means approve or pass, the Declaration of the Rights of Man. So in October 1789, this mob of angry women, thousands of them, show up to Versailles. And they've got guns, they've got pitchforks, they've got knives. I mean, it's an unruly mob, and it's mostly made of women. So here's one of these great times in history that women are going to cause a very significant change. So they're starving, they're angry about bread prices, and another thing that they're frustrated with is the fact that Louis XVI is chilling in his palace doing nothing and kind of ignoring the situation. So this mob of angry women, as you can see from this time period depiction, this illustration here, are marching to Versailles, and they kind of mill around and hang around the palace, and they basically refuse to leave. And Louis XVI tries to ignore them, but he can't. They start chanting. Some women start chanting for, like, the Queen. Things get a little tense, and Louis XVI gets intimidated. So he finally agrees to basically meet with them. And they basically say, you need to get your butt to Paris, because remember, Versailles is outside of Paris. You need to get your butt to Paris, Louis XVI, you and your whole family, and we want you to show your support for the French Revolution because we are starving, we don't have bread, and nothing's getting fixed. So, Louis XVI, I mean, what are you going to say? No. I mean, they've got freaking guns and knives, and they're angry. So, like I said, they're marching because of bread prices and the king's lack of support for the revolution. So, I mean, and here's the thing in the eyes of the peasants. The king of France is supposed to be kind of like a fatherly protector. So the peasants are like the children, and they're marching to dad saying, look, dad, we're hungry, we're starving. Can you please come to Paris to show your support? But it's a little bit more sinister than that. Well, here's what happens. Louis XVI actually agrees to go to Paris and move his whole family to the old Palace of France, which is called the Tuileries. Which the Tuileries today, guys, is like a big carnival. There's like a big Ferris wheel, and it's right next to the Louvre, the big museum. But anyway, that's the old palace of the Bourbon kings before Versailles was built by Louis XIII. So he agrees, and as they load up the carts to go back to France, Louis XVI says, you know what, I'm going to be a nice guy, and I'm going to take all the grain in the big palace and city of Versailles. I'm going to load it onto the cart so that the peasants can see I'm bringing grain that they can have bread. So, interesting, they force Louis and his family to leave Versailles and move into Paris to support the new government. Now, Louis XVI is trying to play nice and bringing them a whole bunch of grain, but it's really funny, as they start marching into the streets, the women start chanting things like, oh, look who we've captured and brought back to France. And you can imagine Louis XVI is like, wait, what? Like, say psych right now. You just said captured? We agreed to go with you? So, kind of intimidating a little bit, although the the royal family's not in any danger, but you can kind of see the attitude of the peasants are walking back saying, we've captured the king. And the king's like, wait a second, I agreed to go with you guys, and look, I'm bringing grain. All right? So this is 1789. I want you to remember that year. Because you know what? 1790, it's actually pretty calm. 1791, it's actually pretty calm. So guys, this is kind of the French Revolution. There are periods where lots of stuff happened, like 1789. Guys, I mean, the tennis court oath, the storming of the Bastille, the States General, all happened in 89, and it's really crazy. But after Louis goes to Paris, things kind of calm down. Because it looks like the king's going to cooperate. Pause if you need to. All right, now, reorganizing the government. Well, they finally hammer out 2 years later. So guys, it's been 2 years, 1790. Everything's calm. Nothing really crazy happens except maybe an occasional bread riot in a city. But guys, Louis XVI is kind of playing nice. Although, if you really see what's going on, he's very hesitant to sign really anything. So, the Constitution of 1791, all right? So, they finally getting around. Remember, the tennis court oath said the National Assembly was going to keep meeting until they wrote a constitution, right? So, they finally wrote one. And the Constitution is very, very, very much like the Constitution in England and even the Constitution of the United States. So they created a constitutional monarchy. They went and did it. The crazy SOBs, that's like an also meme with Jeff Goldblum, they did it. All right, they created a constitutional monarchy, and they said from now on, basically Louis XVI is going to be the executive branch of government, kind of like the president. All right, we talked about that a little bit yesterday. And the National Assembly is going to be the legislative branch of government. All right, so in this constitution, they've essentially, like I told you, I guess I already talked about this in yesterday's notes, but they basically are going to create a government very much like Great Britain's. Now, the king is going to have a limited amount of power, for instance, like a veto, and the veto can kind of slow down if the National Assembly wants to pass a law. A veto doesn't kill it. It kind of slows it down for more debate, but he does have a veto, okay? So anyway, they've created a constitutional monarchy. All right. So another thing that the Constitution of 1791 says is that only land-owning men had the right to vote. They were what were called active citizens. So in this new government, you're going to have active citizens and passive citizens. So once again, only land-owning men could vote, which is about 53,000 people out of a population of about 8 to 10 million. So think about that, guys. Less than 1% of the people are going to be allowed to vote. All right? So I want you to notice something about the French Revolution. Are things really changing? I mean, before the French Revolution, who had political power? About 1% of the population. After the French Revolution has begun, who has political power? About 1% of the population. It's just that maybe the bourgeoisie can now have more political rights. But you want to talk about the peasants? Do things really change for them? That's a big no. So they would, non-land-owning people like peasants, like, well, some peasants own land, but non-land-owning peasants and women, they had no political participation, and this would have been about 80% of France. All right, which would have been probably roughly around 7 million, or wait, if there's 8 million people in France, 7 million people, guys, are still going to be without political rights. And they were what are called passive citizens. So this is one of the reasons why there keeps on being revolution after revolution after revolution in France, is because they keep ignoring the people at the bottom, and they really hesitate to fix the problems of France. All right? So, now, Olympe de Gouges is a French woman, and she's a journalist. Well, she's actually the daughter of a butcher, all right? But anyway, she is going to be a writer in the French Revolution, and she's going to kind of speak up much in the way, I mean, the Constitution of 1791 very much follows Rousseau's idea of separate spheres. You guys remember Rousseau argued in the Enlightenment that there should be separate spheres for women and men, and the men should do political things, right? And the women should do domestic things. Well, Olympe de Gouges, all right, kind of argued that the Declaration of the Rights of Man should also apply to women. She actually wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Women in the Citizen. And most of it was just replacing everywhere it said man and adding and women. Okay? But her whole argument was, hey, as long as we're going to have a revolution, let's give women some rights. Now, it didn't work. All right, look at where it says D 1793. She dies 1793. Yeah, she's going to be one of the victims of what's called the guillotine. But anyway, all right, now, another thing she argued was that women should be allowed to have property rights. See, up to this point, only men could own property. So let's say if you were a woman and mom and dad died and you inherited their estate, well, you controlled their land until you got married, then it became your husband's. So women weren't really allowed to own property. Now, another thing was she wanted women the right to initiate divorce. See, divorce was a tricky thing in the time period. Basically, it was really hard to get. It was especially hard to get for a woman. Men could usually divorce their wives without a lot of evidence that it was needed. But women had to go through a lot of legal hoops, I guess, in order to get a divorce from their husband. So it was really hard. Even if your husband was abusive or whatever, it was hard to get a divorce. So basically, that's what she wanted. Now, like I said, it's not going to work, and women after the Constitution of 1791 aren't going to magically get the right to vote, okay? So nothing like that really changes, but you do see women arguing, hey, what about us? Pause if you need to. All right, now, reorganizing the economy. So, guys, it's always complicated talking about the economy to most people. Guys, I struggle with understanding the economy, but basically, one of the things that the new Constitution is going to do, it's going to have free trade. All right, no more royal monopolies. You guys remember how with mercantilism, basically the king and the crown had monopolies over all trade, right? Well, now they're going to say laissez-faire, which is Adam Smith's whole idea that monopolies are a bad thing, and basically let individual people own their own business and kind of do what they want, leave the economy alone. So they are going to let basically no more monopolies and free trade. So if you want to own your own business and trade with whoever you want, go for it. Let supply and demand kind of dictate price. And that's what they say would help bread prices. Now, here's one of the things about free trade. That means theoretically that the government should not interfere with businesses. Well, one of the things that you're going to see early on when the Industrial Revolution is going on, which it's already kind of beginning right now, is that basically factory workers have no rights. So if a factory owner wants to make a worker work like 16 hours a day and pay them very little, that is basically, there's nothing they can do about it. So a lot of workers, when factory owners were being unfair, would band together and not exactly form unions, but they're going to. So one of the things, guys, and this is where, this is one way, guys, that the new government might have gone wrong. They passed the Chapelier Law. All right? And the Chapelier Law said basically workers were not allowed to organize and fight against like unfair treatment, fight for higher wages. It basically outlawed workers banding together. So you know what this means? Because of the Chapelier Law, that means there's no protection for workers. So if you are a worker in France, sucks to be you. All right? All right, now, here is part number 2, where the new government might have really shot themselves in the foot and pissed a whole bunch of people off. They passed what is called the Civil Constitution of the Clergy. Now, I always tell my classes when I teach this, you can mess with a lot of things, with human beings, but if you're the government, one thing you want to be careful about messing with is people's religion. So, let me kind of tell you how things work before this law. Well, France is Catholic, right? So one of the things is Catholic bishops and priests are appointed by the clergy and the Pope and things like that. So here's the deal. The government said, well, what if, number one, we're going to confiscate all lands of the Catholic Church. Now remember, France is in a lot of debt and they still haven't worked on paying it off. So one of the first things they get, I'm sorry guys, I jumped the gun with how bishops are chosen. Hold on. So they're still in debt, and one of the things that the government gets is they're like, hey, what if we confiscated or took all the Catholic Church's land? All right, because remember, guys, the Catholic Church land belongs to the Catholic Church, the popes in Rome, right? What if we confiscated all land belonging to the Catholic Church, and we sold that land to pay off some of the government debt? It was a pretty good idea if you think about it, but I want you to think about if you're a peasant and you're Catholic, you see the government now grabbing up God's land, the church's land, and selling it. Kind of makes you upset, right? Then they say, look, we are going to bring the church under the control of the state. From now on, officials are going to be elected by the people, and paid for by the state, and not appointed by the bishops and the Roman Catholic clergy. All right? Now, why that would piss off the people is Basically, basically, guys, the government is going to choose who your priests are and who your bishops are. All right. And a lot of people don't like the fact that the government is taking control of the church. They see it as an attack on the church. So here is kind of a political cartoon that shows the Catholic clergy here being kind of patted down or searched by the government. All right. So anyway, guys, the peasants and the common people, 80% of France, are going to be really pissed off about this because it looks like the new government is attacking the church. Now, have I said anything yet about the government saying, you know what, we should probably fix the problems of France and get the people bread? No. All right? So keep in mind, they're doing all these things, but the peasants are still sitting there thinking, okay, this is great. Yay, we're all equal, even though we're not. Can I please have some bread? Pause if you need to. Oh, yeah, it angered the church officials, the people, and the Pope. Yeah. Anyway, pause if you need to. All right, reorganizing territory. Well, before this, France was kind of weirdly organized, all right? And what happens is, under the Constitution of 1798, France was going to be reorganized into 83 roughly the same size departments. So if you look at this map, guys, this is how France even looks to this very day. You know how like we have like districts and we have like we live in the county of Los Angeles, right? So they organized all of their things very similar, and they're all roughly the same size, so they'd be kind of equal, right? It goes with the idea of equality. And another thing they did was, I told you, they used to have taxes when you wanted to sell things from one place to another. So in each department, they got rid of those tariffs. So now you have free trade in any department. All right? Is that a very big deal? No. Are you going to have to talk about it on a test? I don't know. Probably not. All right. Number 6, the metric system. Okay, so you guys know what the metric system is. Hopefully, the United States and like 2 other countries in the world are the only people that don't use the metric system because, you know, America. But basically, one of the things that France decided to adopt was a uniform system of weights and measures. So, you know, like millimeter, centimeter, kilometer, those are all the metric system. So they decided to adopt the metric system to make everything a little bit more make sense. Okay? Pause if you need to. Let's go to our last slide. All right. I call this, I'm a head out. And hopefully you guys have seen that meme. Well, here's the deal. Immigrants. Well, a lot of French aristocrats, once all this is going down, realize that they're kind of in trouble, maybe, and they're losing power. So the old, like, nobles of the sword, a lot of the old nobility, they're like, F this, I'm out. Okay, so I made this little meme with a French aristocrat instead of SpongeBob, and I'm gonna head out. Okay? It's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, I spent like 3 minutes on that. But anyway, so a lot of them left France for neighboring nations in hopes that some of them thought maybe they can help organize resistance to come back in and stop the revolution. Some of them are just like, I'm gonna head out and live somewhere else. Some of them fled to Great Britain. Some of them fled to Prussia, Austria, lots of places. Okay? All right, now, Louis XVI is going to attempt to flee. Okay, well, up to this point, Louis XVI is not in trouble, and his family's not really in trouble. And most of France still looks at him like a fatherly figure. Well, here's what happens. As you know, Marie Antoinette's brother is the Emperor of Austria, correct? So, June 20th, 1791, Louis and his family dress up like servants one night. They climb aboard this carriage, and their goal is to sneak out of Paris and make it to Austria, where maybe they can get Marie Antoinette's brother to bring in an army to help stop the revolution. Here's the problem. They were a few miles just outside of Austria at the city of Varennes, where they are stopped and checked because everything going in and out of France is checked, all right? And one of the people notices that this guy's the king. Pretty soon there are revolutionary guards swarming, and they find out Louis XVI is trying to leave, and he's trying to go to Austria. And this, guys, is probably where Louis XVI seals his own fate. All right? Now the people of France feel betrayed by their king, and they feel threatened. Think about it. Your king, who you love and respect, was about ready to go to another country, get an army, and bring it back into your country to wage war to stop the revolution. By the way, here's an inappropriate picture of Marie Antoinette. It's pretty tame. It shows her whole family trying to flee and run away. And if you can see the bottom left, these guys down here are trying to look up her skirt. And once again, guys, it's in this guy here too. It's very much like derogatory towards Marie Antoinette. Pause if you need to. All right. Well, lastly, the Declaration of Pillnitz, okay? So, Emperor Leopold II of Austria is Marie Antoinette's brother, and King Frederick William II, we've talked about him, of Prussia, Leopold's ally. They all get together and they're like, look, they threaten to invade France if the French government harms Louis or the family. All right? So now, guys, you have Austria and Prussia threatening war on France if Louis XVI or Marie Antoinette or anybody in the family is harmed. So now, guys, it's like France's worst fears have come true, and they are now being threatened by foreign armies. Now, guys, we're going to leave off right here, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is where the merde hits the fan. And you might be like, what does merde mean? It's the French word for shoot, poop. All right. Have a good night.